And we are here. Hi, my name is Alicia Essig, and I am your host of Caught in the Middle. And this here is my good friend, Paige Fingerhut Charnick. And I'm probably, as long as I've known you, I probably have butchered that, but I apologize.
You got it. You got it.
Okay, good. Okay. So, if many of you know me, you know that I'm a real estate agent. And you also know that that's not really the focus of this podcast. However, on occasion, it's going to get sprinkled in. And today is one of those days. And Paige is a fellow colleague out in Long Beach, California. So, if you do need any real estate needs, please reach out to Paige in Long Beach, California. But that being said, Paige actually specializes in probate and estate matters. And as you know, the goal of this podcast here is, we are caught in the middle. We are taking care of our parents and our children and ourselves, and proper planning is huge. And I think that this discussion today is going to be super important for you guys so that you can make sure that you're taking care of your parents and that you know where everything is. And it's not a fun conversation, but our parents are going to go. And it can be tragic and messy, or it can be beautiful and planned, and we can let them go and we can love them in our hearts, and then it won't be nearly dramatic. But I do have a disclaimer that I need to read to you. So please understand that this is not legal advice. Today's conversation is for general educational purposes only. Neither Paige nor I provide legal, financial, or tax advice, and we are not acting as attorneys. Laws and requirements vary by state and by individual situations, so anything we discuss today should be considered informational and not a substitute for working directly with a qualified attorney or professional in your area. Please, please, please know that we are not attorneys. We are realtors and we have opinions, and Paige has a depth and a breadth of knowledge that only she can bring to this conversation. So thank you and welcome for getting up early and hanging out with us today.
Love it. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about all these things. I know they're all the things that people don't like to talk about, but I love to talk about them because it saves people so much heartache later and so many, and money too. Let's not forget that part. So I'm happy to dive in for, what I've been saying lately, like hard conversations, better outcomes. So
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know I'm into that right now.
I
So
love that.
let's do that
But
basically.
speaking of, why do you think so many families avoid estate planning and these conversations? Like, yes, obviously they're hard, but really let's layer it down.
So initially, when families are young and their kids are, I don't know, in middle school, nobody wants to answer the question, who gets the kids? That's pretty much why families initially start not doing this. Is it going to be your sister or my sister? Or we don't have any sister, and then you have to actually put that on paper. And so nobody wants to answer that question. So that's, I think, where as you're growing wealth and you have a property and you have kids and you start adding things to the mix, and then you just don't do it because you don't want to answer those hard questions actually. But then later in life, I think people avoid doing it for a couple reasons. One, you have a lot of second or third marriages where people don't want to answer those hard questions about your adult children or my adult children and who's best to put in charge of things. And so we just don't answer the question because if we don't answer it, then it's not real. So there's different phases, but it's usually at its core people don't want to answer questions that are hard things to, you might feel a certain way or lean a certain way, but then you have to answer that question maybe with a spouse, maybe not. And so it's just hard to answer the question.
Yeah, it's. I was telling my daughter this morning that I was doing this episode with you today, and she started asking me some questions, and I was like, we, my husband and I actually need to redo ours because our kids have they're gone over the 18 mark, and so they're adults now, and so everything is different, and we own more property, and we have more money, and we have more things, and but I think we also need a health directive in the mix, which we'll talk about later in the episode. But what are the patterns you see when families are underprepared or unprepared?
So it's usually a combination of things. When people don't go get a trust, it's usually one, they think it's too expensive. So they think, oh, that's for rich people. That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
I think they don't want to answer the questions. And then also, I think there's like an element of mistrust about the legal profession. Like, I think people don't like to talk to lawyers if they don't have to. Similar to realtors. They don't want to talk to realtors either if they don't have to. But I think, yeah, there's an element of like, I don't want to do that.
Well, I think that I'm not the expert. Again, we're not lawyers. We're sort of experts, but we're not really. We just have a lot of experience
I
with
was happy
people.
you said that at the beginning. I was like, great, I don't have to reiterate it.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. But in our line of work, again, which really specializes in, working with probates and trusts. And so that's why I brought her on here. But even in my world, I've done plenty of, estate sales and divorces or whatever else where these these things are so intersected with emotion, and it's like it's emotion, it's charged. How many people listening have siblings that maybe they don't quite get along with. And then there's like, well, mom chose you. So it's not just paperwork. It's absolutely a ton of emotion, and it's charged, but I also agree. And I say this all the time because in my line of work, I have to have hard conversations hourly sometimes, with different people.
Every
And
day.
those hard conversations, if you take anything away from this episode, it's that have the hard conversations. They will help you to get out of the middle if you're currently caught in the middle. And that's sort of my goal.
Well, and here's the reality. You're going to have hard conversations, hard financial issues, hard emotions. Like there's an element of hard coming for everyone, but it's like choose your heart, and you choose your heart now by having those hard conversations with your own close relatives, with your parents, with your spouse's parents, with your adult children, with your younger children, even all of the things. You have those conversations because if you don't, the hard later is more expensive, more painful, more emotion filled. It's all the things. So if you don't do some element of planning, the hard gets much harder later. It's kind of like your health. It's like you take care of it now or you pay later.
It's all related, and doing the hard things is what will make that time that is inevitable. Our parents will not live forever. We will not live forever. So making those decisions now is so huge.
No one's getting out of here alive.
Right. And
I
also,
hate
just for
to say it.
anybody, if they're watching this, no, we're not sisters, but yes, we are two very smart redheads. We also have a hard conversation as well. Maybe it's a redhead thing. I don't know. Questions for you. What documents should the adult children know that they exist, and even if they don't control them?
So you want to know where the trust is in your family home. You want to know where it is. And that trust, and again, I'm based in California. So my perspective is going to be from a California perspective. But you want to know where the trust is physically in the home. Ideally, your parent will give you a copy of it to keep, but you should know where they keep things. In that document, it's really not just one trust. It's actually like a 5 document package that you get. And again, not an attorney, but you get a trust, you get a pour over will, you get a power of attorney, you get an advanced healthcare directive, and I think there's one thing I'm missing. But basically, it's like a package of documents that your attorney will help you craft for your state and your state's guidelines and rules and laws. And you need to have those things in place. And then if you're the adult child dealing with a parent who either has a trust or has a will, and I think like we wanted to address that topic, I think of like people think they have a will, like I'm good. In some states, that might be true, but in most states, that's not true. And even if you have a will, that'll dictate like what the wishes are, but it won't actually, in California, it won't actually help you avoid probate court at all. And so if somebody has a will and not a trust here, and like in many, many states, you'll go to probate. And what that means is it'll cost you probate fees. Like ultimately, the government will get your family's money instead of your family retaining the wealth, which is the last thing that your parents or your family that left you something would want to have happen. But that's what happens when they don't address it early on. So a will is not typically sufficient in most states. There are a few.
So then tell
Yeah.
us, what is a family trust? Like, what is that?
So, one of my favorite trust attorneys describes the trust like a purse. And I love this analogy because the point she's trying to make is that you can carry the purse around with you and it'll be empty. right? And then you're just carrying around an empty purse that's not taking anything with you. Like you need your lipstick and you need your wallet and you need your key, like the things that go in your purse, right? And hopefully men can relate to this analogy too. But the reason she describes it like a purse, and I just think this is so perfect, is that you have to put things in the purse in order for them to be in the trust. And if you don't put the things in, then they're not in the trust. And the example is basically your property, your bank accounts, your personal property that you want to give to somebody. Like if you don't name those things in the trust, then they're not in there and they still go to probate. So basically and that's like sort of a out there analogy, but ultimately the trust is how you provide a plan for what you want to have happen to your assets when you're not alive or not well.
Okay. And so a trust completely avoids probate. So let me give you an
Only the
understanding.
things in the only the things in the trust. If you
Only
leave
the
a
things
bank
in the
account.
trust avoid probate. So I'm currently in 2026, just turned 52, coming up on 23 years ago, my dad passed away. And the summer prior to that, my dad actually did exactly that. And so my dad referred to me, the German word for sweetheart is Schatzi. And so he would say, he said to me this summer, it was like this summer of 2002, he said to me, Shetzi, I need to show you where the papers are. And now I was 28 years old and I was like, Daddy, what are you talking about? But he was 77, so I should have paid attention to him. I did pay attention to him. But he was like, I want to show you where the papers are. I want to show you where the papers are. And I was like, fine. And so he was like, here's where the long-term care insurance is. Here's my will. Here's this. Here's that. And he showed me where all the things are, but he did not have a trust. Now, in Maryland, and again, I don't know if any of you are listening outside of Maryland or California, check with your local, either attorneys or your local laws, but in Maryland, when my father died, everything went into the estate. In Maryland, it's called the estate. Everything went into the estate. And then the attorney then had to like put notices out in the paper and be like, hey, this man died. Does anybody, does he owe you anything? And then people had 6 months to say, yes, he owes me, blah, blah, blah. And then in that 6 months, I had to sell the real estate, sell, whatever. There were certain things that he was like, Alicia gets the car, so and so gets this. He had stipulations in there on who got his ashes, which was pretty funny because I got them and nobody else wanted them. And they are still sitting in my living room, which they are lovely there. Who knows what my kids are going to do with my father's ashes? But nonetheless, there was that stipulation, but there was no trust. At the end of the 6 months, all the bills were paid. And then what was left was divided equally amongst the remaining children that were included in the will, because there was actually one child not included in the will.
So that sounds like probate in California.
Okay.
Maybe it wasn't called probate, but when you have an estate,
Mhm.
ultimately the state dictates they'll follow the will, like they'll follow the wishes of the will,
Mhm.
but ultimately someone is appointed to be the administrator of the estate.
That was me. Yeah. Yeah. So
So that's
here
like
it's called the personal representative
Mhm.
of the estate.
It is in most places called a personal representative. I think people, I don't know. I guess I stopped using that term because so many realtors started throwing it around in the wrong way that I kind of stopped using that term, but that is the correct legal term.
Okay.
They are
That's
called
why I had to
personal
sign
representative.
everything. Yeah.
What's really awful, I will
So what's
say,
the Okay, go ahead.
if if you're an adult child and you're working with your parent to have them put a trust together, a lot of times people are named co-administrators. Like if there's 3 siblings, all 3 are in charge if the parent puts a trust together like that, or sometimes people are appointed that way. And that's a particularly awful experience because like every single person has to go to the bank. Every single person has to sign like you were able to autonomously operate in that experience, but imagine having to do that with a sibling that you don't get along with
Mm,
or a sibling that lives out of state and thinks they know best. Or
right.
those are the kinds of things that I see in my practice here. But yes, that sounds pretty much like a probate type
So
situation.
what's the difference? Like, what's the difference and I guess benefits between a trust and just having a will?
So, for one thing, well, there's some new regulations coming down March 1st, but up until this point, a trust has been private.
Meaning,
meaning that it's not public record. So, a lot of times a will or a probated estate, there's a public record that you could go to the courthouse, pull a file, and look it up. So the privacy is one thing. The other thing is that the estate, like, so in your case with your dad, right? The will was followed, his wishes were honored. But if there had been a dispute, if there had been anything that, like, basically their laws dictated how everything else flowed to people, like your state's laws. And if that was not in congruence with what your dad would have wanted, then ultimately, like, the state's laws are winning instead of his choices.
mm,
And it sounds
right.
like that probably worked. He got to
So
say what he wanted.
a trust doesn't trump state law though, does it?
No, it has to be within legal guidelines. I'm saying in terms of, like, maybe there's one sibling that, and I think you said that there was one sibling that didn't inherit anything. So those wishes were honored. But a lot of times, well, in California, if there's only a will saying that, that might not be honored. And that's where we're getting a little legal expertise where I can't speak to when it would be or not be. But the trust secures your wishes,
Mm,
and the rest left to the state's devices will follow legal guidelines and not your wishes. I'm not saying you can do something that's not legal, but I'm just saying, like, they'll follow the state's rules for dispersing funds, which might include a child you didn't want to give anything to.
okay. Okay. So the inverse is someone passes without anything in place. What happens?
They will go through probate, and there's different thresholds. There's also small estates too. So again, from my perspective here, the probate threshold in California for many years, it just went up, but for many years was like $183,000. So in California, that's like, if you have a mobile home, you're hitting that threshold. Our average sales price here in Long Beach is like roughly 850,000. So if somebody has more than $183,000 in assets or in cash, they're kicking probate into gear.
Okay.
But there are small estates where if somebody rented and didn't own property and had, like, accounts less than 183, they could be settled through a small estate where no probate would happen. And there's some controversial things in California right now where that threshold was just raised to like 750. So the probate attorneys are not super happy about that because that takes a large chunk of their probate business out of their hands.
Mm,
They're not happy about it for other reasons because these legal considerations actually, I'm getting a little into the weeds now, but those legal considerations actually don't allow someone to open a full probate, which means, like, they can't, like, do stuff for the funeral with the body. It doesn't give them full powers. And so the probate attorneys are, one, upset about their business, but two, really upset because the people who need to act aren't given full powers to act.
So, if you're listening to this in a state outside of California or even outside of Maryland, I highly recommend you kind of find out what that threshold is for your state so that if your parents do not, or either you or your parents don't have either a will or a life estate in place or life. Oh, yeah. See, there we go. I threw out a word that I don't even know what that is: life estate, family trust.
Can I tell you about that real quick?
Let me
Like that.
finish the thing.
Okay.
Find out what that threshold is if you have nothing in place.
Yes.
That's the lesson here in this. Okay.
So a life estate is frequently used in, like, a spouse number 6 or something like that.
You're kidding me, right?
No. So, I mean, it could be anything, but or like an adult child, maybe with special needs or something like that, but it can be used for good. But sometimes it's used in really unusual situations. And it's basically like someone says, "Okay, well, I want my house to go to this charity, right? But I don't want it to go to them until my adult child or my sixth husband or whoever finishes living out their time in the home. So they get to live in it for the duration of their life. And then I want the home to go wherever I want it to go." So the life estate is for
Is
the
it
person.
specifically with regarding real estate? Because I
Yeah.
actually have a friend going through that right now.
Yeah.
Her mom passed away. The dad is no, not the dad. Not the dad.
Right. That's
That's
usually
it.
the
Not
case.
the dad's
Uh-huh.
yes. Husband, stepdad, whatever. And in the either trust or whatever, there was a life estate. So I guess
Yeah.
you're talking about that purse. Is the life estate in the trust?
Yes. Well,
I learned.
and so here's the thing with that. It's like, okay, I'm married to husband number 2 or 3, but I want the proceeds of this home, this $1 million home, whatever it is, to benefit my kids from my previous marriage but I don't want my kids from my previous marriage to kick my current husband out of the home when he has 5, 10, 15 years left of his life, right? I want
Gotcha.
him to be able to stay in the home. My kids can benefit in 10 years when he passes.
Okay.
That's usually why that's set up. And it's usually
Right,
when one,
because when married people here, this is a real estate thing.
yeah,
When married people take ownership of a home, the title company or whoever does the closing will ask you how you would like to take title. And married people have a special way of taking title called joint tenants in the entirety or tenants by entirety.
also different state by state, but yeah.
Okay, so tenants by entirety. But what that means is that when one spouse passes, the ownership of the one spouse who has passed away immediately becomes the second owner's full ownership. So there is nothing that has to do with any kind of estate or probate. The surviving spouse winds up owning all of the portions of it if they took title in that way.
In a joint tenant, yeah.
Is it joint tenants or tenants by the entirety?
For us, it's joint tenants. Again, every state's different. So you need to talk to your own local trust attorney and own
But there
local realtor.
is a special ownership for married people. So just again, if you are considering buying real estate and you are married and you want your portion, if you pass away, to automatically go to your surviving spouse, make sure you take title in that fashion.
Can I tell you something that happened? So here's how that gets screwed. Here's how that gets screwed up, and here's why you really need a trust attorney. And people they think they can do it on their own, but they really screw things up. So I had a situation where there was mother and daughter in the home,
Hmm.
and ex-husband did not live in the home. It was like fairly amicable. And it was like mom and daughter were both sick with different things. And so one of them, I think it was the mom, got a trust because mom and daughter were both sick. Ex-husband, like wanted things to just go to his daughter. So it was like fine. Mom and daughter were in, the husband came off with a quit claim deed. Mom and daughter were in the home as joint tenants. Everything would have been fine, except mom got a trust and severed their joint tenancy. And then 50% of that had to be probated. Um, they both ended
So
up
hold
passing
on, back up. How did the trust?
because it was a different ownership entity. It wasn't the mom anymore. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you can screw it up real easily. You need professional advice wherever you are, which I think
Well,
we've made
and
that
it's so
point.
funny because one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, do you
Mm-hmm.
need a lawyer? And you're basically
Please,
answering that question.
please get one.
Please,
Get a good one.
please, please, please. So, like, for planning for our own stuff, right? Like, sometimes, again, this podcast is called Caught in the Middle. So, it's not just about our parents. In a future episode, I'm going to be talking about the actual day to day and taking care of our parents when, I understand and I see this also as a real estate agent where so many people really should move out of their home because it's, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 square feet and, however much land, and they just shouldn't take care of it and they're going to fall down. So getting out of that long-term family home is really a good idea. I also know from a real estate perspective that the average human doesn't like the options, and that's why they're not moving
Or they can't afford the
or
options.
they
Yeah.
can't afford the options. So, they are stuck in their long-term home. But that being said, I'm 52. I've got one kid that's graduated and one that is just starting college. And so it's like, what are the kinds of things that where you're just like I was talking with Maddie, we need to redo it. They're over 18 now. What are those kinds of things that we should be talking to either lawyers about, getting a trust set up? Like, what should we be doing?
So at this age, you and we have a lot of friends as well. Their kids are going to college. And I think the thing that I really like to impress upon parents that have 18-year-olds is that once your kid turns 18, your parental rights kind of go out
They're
the
done.
window.
Yeah.
So when you send your kids to college, you really probably want an advanced healthcare directive where they still allow you to make decisions for them when they are, as my attorney friends put it, alive but not able to make decisions for themselves.
So you're talking about again getting advanced healthcare directives on our kids.
Yeah. They're still young. Wouldn't you wanna be able to make the decision if they were in the hospital not able to make a decision for themselves?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're
Did
so
I
smart,
did
Paige.
I just blow your mind? I know.
You did just blow my mind. You totally did. Because I know I don't think I have an advanced healthcare directive. And, our will is very old. It's from, like as I was telling Maddie, it's, well, if we die, who's going to take care of you?
So you can all do them. That would be great if they can also make decisions for you if you are also
Exactly.
alive but not well.
Well,
Everyone in the family can do one.
now, here's the thing. My dad did have an advanced healthcare directive, and my dad suffered a pretty major stroke. And I really hope that, 23 years later, they are better than they were 23 years ago, because the level of vague was really hard for me to make a decision
Yeah.
while I was 28. The language was, and you have to tell me, but the language was something like, if you know DNR unless there is a meaningful quality of life. And, with a stroke, the doctors, and again, maybe the technology in stroke care is better now, but the effects of a stroke can't always be determined right then and there when they're like, well, should we, put a tube down your dad's throat? And I'm like,
You're not a doctor and you didn't know what your dad wanted.
yeah. So again, back up to the top of the call, having those conversations and detailed versions of them, because I didn't let them put a tube down his throat, but they, manually suctioned him quite a bit. He wound up surviving that initial stroke. And then they sent him to PT. And it was, just a very ugly existence for roughly 5 months, because the effects of the stroke were pretty, catastrophic, and he did not have a meaningful opportunity at a quality of life. So these advanced health directives, I am hoping they're a little more detailed, or either that, or maybe if you're listening to this and they're not detailed, make sure you have the conversation in detail about what you want.
I think what I would want most people to know about this conversation, and I still have both of my parents, though they are aging. My husband lost both of his parents when he was very young, early 20s, like 21, 22, like 10 days apart, unrelated. So he and I have had lots of conversations about these types of things. And just so also a little background, my dad was also a real estate broker and also did this type of real estate. So I grew up in a family where like we sell houses of dead people. That's just the fact of the matter. So my family has probably like a weird, dark sense of humor about this type of stuff. So I guess let me just preface everything I say with that. But I think the thing about the advanced healthcare directive, like you're saying, I hope it's better. I hope, I wish it's not. I mean, I don't know about the technology of medical advances. I'm sure they're better, but the reality is you're making a decision about your parents' life and that's not better. That's not never better. So I think it's just you want to know what their wishes are. And I'll share a little personal story because I think it illustrates this point. So there's been a long standing conversation, and my parents are aging, so now this is becoming imminent, but there's been a long standing sort of like running joke in my family where my mom, we know that she wants to be cremated and my dad does not, and also wants to be buried where his parents are buried. And like that part's okay with my mom, but basically they don't agree, is really the situation. Like, because it's also not just like you do you and I'll do me. No, like my dad also wants my mom with him. And so I was like, well, how can we problem solve this? Like, and so it's kind of been like a long running joke in my family. But now, like, I'm like, guys, I need an answer. Like, I need to know what's the definitive situation here.
Well, they probably, back to the not wanting to talk about, they probably don't want to talk about it themselves.
They don't want to decide because the decision is they both want to do different things. And I'm like, I'm going to end up having to make this decision and I'm going to be pissed at both of them because we've talked about this for years. So in the end, though, I do ultimately know what both of
They
them
want.
want. And so even down to care, right? Like my dad's very social and my mom is not. And I'm like, well, my mom probably will want to be in her house and nothing else. And my dad is kind of like, well, I want to talk to the people. He'll still want to be in his house, but I'm like, I think he might want to be around socialization and like, and so like we are able, I think because I grew up in this business, Which also there is like some drawbacks to that because in my own family, I can see where the problems are coming. I think what's actually nice when you don't have a lot of education about this topic is that like you might end up in a horrible situation, but you'll hire us professionals to get you through it. But actually from my perspective, I'm like I see this problem and I see that problem and and I'm going to see it all coming for I mean, hopefully longer than 20 years. But I see it all coming. And so I know like we only have limited time, but I just want to say one other piece here that I would wish for everyone to take away because it's the things that I did as I felt like, oh, my parents are aging, which like don't send them this podcast. They don't want to hear that. My dad's retired. Don't tell him. Like he like those things, right? But the thing that I would want people to take away, and this is what I did for myself as the professional that I am, I pulled every single property that they own because we have rental property. And I made sure that it was in the trust. I made sure that all the taxes were paid. I actually found a random tax bill from like 3 or 4 years ago on one property. The taxes had all been paid since, but the assessor had not credited them for 1 year, which they did actually pay. But we're getting to the point now where I was like, did they not? Like, who's right? Are my parents right or is the assessor like, who, did they pay or not? Right. But they did. And so we got that solved. So I did an audit of every single asset that they have. I have a copy of their trust. I have it in my house. I know where they keep it in their house. So if they go and update it and for some reason don't tell me, I'll still know where to find it. I know who their trust attorney is so that I can call the attorney if I need to be like, do you have a copy of this document? Yeah, I'll just leave it right there. But auditing what your parents' assets are now will save you a lot of trouble. And last thing I'll add on that is like bank accounts and things. They don't have to be in the name of the trust. They don't have to be, but there should be a beneficiary listed. And the beneficiary most times, again, consult your attorney, but most times should be the trust. And then it's protected.
Okay.
I threw a
So
lot at you. I know.
no, 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 no. This is all good, but I want to break it down. And I also want to add in also an anecdotal story before I break it down. And the anecdotal story is this past fall, a family member passed away and it was like a cousin. And the cousin had been, long, slow, ugly dementia. Right. And so that was awful. And it was a cousin, and I took my mom to go visit her. And my mom hadn't seen her in a very long time. And for any of you listening or watching, a long, long, slow cognitive degenerative disease death is really ugly. And so when we went to visit this family member of ours, they were just a shell, like practically a skeleton. And it really rattled my 82-year-old mother. And so she was like, oh my God, I don't want that to be me. And then she passed away. And once she finally passed, because she was on like hospice for, I think, like 2 weeks, where she was like, she's going to die any minute. And it took a long time. And my mom kept saying after she died, what are the plans? What are the plans? And I'm like, Mom, I don't know. I don't know what the plans are. I'm waiting to find out what the plans are. And so eventually we find out what the plans are, and it was just a simple lunch. That's it. No funeral, no nothing. Well, my mom was not having it. She was like, and I'm like, Mom, this isn't your funeral. This isn't you. Like, we didn't have any control over this.
Right.
And apparently, the son told me later, and I'm pulling out this desk drawer because I'm going to show you something. The son told me later that in her effects, they did find a handwritten note that said a few instructions on, just a couple of instructions on what that the person who passed away wanted. So the next time I see my mother, she gives me this envelope, which is just basically her funeral decisions.
Yeah.
It's what she wants for her funeral, which is now sitting right there. Hopefully
Yeah.
I don't need to use it anytime soon, but, planning and making the plans. And this conversation for me, running through sort of the checklist of what you said is, okay, let's talk, because my mom does have, her husband is not my dad.
Yeah.
So having these kinds of conversations about whether it's a life estate, a trust, all of those things, I think are even, she had redone her will several years back. But I think she needs to do it again because we need to take into consideration what's going on with my stepdad and a few of the other, pieces that you had talked about. So I know I'm like super grateful for this conversation, and Paige is Paige is the best.
Can I tell you one thing about that letter? Because this is how my brain works.
Yes.
I'm like, please go put it in a safe deposit box. Please. Because I know you don't want to open
Right.
it and like scan it or anything. I know you don't want to open it, but like,
Well, I've opened it. I know exactly what it says.
well, then have a digital copy because
Oh,
I'm
okay.
like, what if there's a fire? What
No,
if
she
like,
wrote she reviewed it with me. She
okay,
pulled it out of the envelope and she was like, "Here's what I want." Okay.
please have a digital copy.
Thank you. I will. I will. That's very good. That is very good. Any final parting words for life planning?
Here's my final thought. The boomers. I mean,
God love them.
our
They're
generation
okay.
too, right? Like I care a lot about Gen X, but I think because of the work that I do, I'm real focused on the boomers. And this generation, like they went to war, they built all this wealth, like and we didn't even talk about the wealth transfer, like that could be a part 2 if you want to, but they deserve better. Like
Ugh.
they deserve
Yes,
better
I agree.
professionals, they deserve better care, they deserve better than what is available to them right now. And so it's not going to be like I have clients right now where they have no kids and I have a partner realtor who's like almost 80 and they called her to help them like move to a care facility and like all the things, right? She has like one brother in Canada and I don't want for all the people, anyone like suffering through aging in a bad way, I don't want like us to be their only, you know what I mean? Like when that happened, I was like, it can't be that like the realtor that sold them the house 25 years ago is like the only resource they have. But that was kind of the case here in this one situation. And so I guess like what I would like to leave people with is like do your own planning now so your kids don't have to go through this. But also, the boomer generation is one where there's so much pride that they're not going to do some of this planning. And so, like, we kind of have to like shuffle them through it and help them. And at the same time, let it be their idea because, like, that's how they operate. And that's what I would hope for is that, like, it just get better for them because it's not great right now.
And to piggyback on that, I think too, in my profession, when I see like I'm working with a couple right now, they're downsizing, their big home they've been in for 40 plus years, they're moving, they're older, they're probably late 70s. They're moving to another state in a 55 and older community, I believe, which is irrelevant. But either way, what I notice as I've aged and now many of my clientele are either the boomer generation, partly because my peers, it's their parents,
Yeah.
right? And what I see is the kids, us, are getting so short and frustrated with them. And I want to acknowledge that I hear you loud and clear, right? Not just the real estate professional, but like the human, the daughter in me wants to also say, slow down with your parents, take a deep breath. They want to talk to you, right? Like I've talked to so many of like whether it's my peer and I'll go to the appointment and I might be at that appointment for 3 hours and the kid's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, it's okay. They just wanted to talk and show me around and show me all of the things in the house. And I'm okay with it because I know that that's that pride thing you had mentioned. They're proud of what they built. They're sad that it's over. And so they just need a little bit more care. And you know what? Sometimes they can be a little difficult to deal with and you're going to just have to filter your own. And if you're so triggered by them, then go get a therapist. And we'll talk about that in another episode too. But Paige, I can't thank you enough for hanging out with me today and having this conversation. You will be back. We will talk more about wealth building. But again, just as a reminder, we said it several times, but this podcast is for general information purposes only. The hosts and the guests are not attorneys, and we do not provide legal, tax, or financial advice. Laws and regulations vary by state and individual circumstance. Listeners should consult with a qualified attorney or professional regarding their specific situation. I was actually trying to do it really fast, like they do on the pharmaceutical commercials. I think I did okay.
You did good.
Faster. Paige, you're the best. I appreciate you so much.
This was great. Thanks for having me.
Of course.